35%. Remember that number, because by the end of this video, you're going to see it show up in a place nobody looks. Not in a transfer fee, not in a possession stat. In the one part of football that everybody watches and nobody measures. Here's what I mean. Every single week, at the end of every single match, one man looks at a watch that only he can read and decides how much longer the game gets to exist. Nobody audits that decision. There's no replay for it. There's no appeal. He holds up a number and reality obeys. And for 100 years, we all agreed to treat that number as neutral, as if it were arithmetic, as if the referee were a calculator with legs. He isn't. And there's a study that proves it, a laboratory experiment that explains it, and a global accident that confirmed it in front of 2 billion people without anyone noticing what they were watching. Let's start with the number. 3 economists went looking for something very specific. They wanted to know whether professional referees, honest ones, well-trained ones, would bend under pressure that wasn't money. Not bribes. Just noise. Just people. So they picked the one decision a referee makes entirely alone, entirely by feel, with no camera and no rulebook to hide behind. How much stoppage time to add? And think about the position that man is actually in. He is the only person in that stadium with no teammates. Every other individual on that pitch has 10 allies and a bench and a crowd behind them. He has a whistle and a watch. He is surrounded by tens of thousands of people who have paid money specifically to be emotional at him, and he is expected to be the one human being in the building with no feelings about the result at all. We ask him to be a machine standing inside a storm. Then we act surprised when he behaves like a person. Then they went through Spanish League matches and asked one question. Does the number change depending on who needs it? It does. When the home team was losing by 1 goal, when the stadium was desperate, when a single minute could rescue the whole afternoon, stoppage time came in about 35% above average. And when the home team was winning by 1 goal, when that same stadium wanted the clock to just die already, stoppage time came in about 29% below average. Same referees, same league, same rulebook. A swing of more than 60 percentage points, entirely determined by which result the building wanted. But here's the detail that turns this from a statistic into an accusation. The bias disappears in blowouts. Think about what that means. If a team is winning 4-0, the referee is fair. Perfectly, boringly fair. The bias only appears when the game is still alive. When the extra minute could actually change something. That's not laziness. That's not sloppiness. That's not a man who's bad at arithmetic. A random error doesn't know the score. This one does. Now, if you've ever argued about this in a pub or in a comment section, you already know what happens next. Somebody says, correlation. Maybe home teams attack more when they're behind. Maybe there are more substitutions, more injuries, more chaos. Maybe the extra time is real? Fair. A number can tell you that something happened. It can't tell you why. So somebody built an experiment to answer exactly that. And it's the strangest, cleanest, most uncomfortable study in football science, and almost nobody outside academia has ever heard of it. 40 qualified referees. 1 room, 1 screen. They took footage of a real match, Liverpool against Leicester, at Anfield, and they cut it into 47 challenges. 47 moments where a tackle happens and a human being has to decide, foul or not a foul. And if it's a foul, who gets it? After each one, the tape stopped. 6 seconds. Decide. And then they split the referees into 2 groups. Half of them watched with the crowd noise on. The roar, the groan, the 70,000 person appeal for a foul. The other half watched the exact same footage in silence. Same tackles, same angles, same frames, same profession, same training. The only variable in the entire experiment was volume. The referees who could hear the crowd gave 15.5% fewer fouls against the home team. Sit with that for a second. Nobody was intimidated. Nobody was threatened. Nobody was in a stadium. These were qualified officials in a quiet room looking at a television and the sound of a crowd that wasn't there, arguing about a game that was already over, moved their judgment by 15%. And there's a second finding that's even more human and honestly a little bit sad. The referees who heard the noise weren't just more biased, they were more uncertain. The noise didn't make them decide wrong, it made them stop being sure. Because that's what the crowd actually is. It isn't an opponent, it's a second opinion, screaming at a volume no human nervous system was built to ignore. Okay, but it's a lab. Screens aren't stadiums. Anfield in a chair isn't Anfield. So football ran the real experiment. It just didn't mean to. For a stretch of years in leagues all over the world, the crowd was removed. Empty stands, empty concourses, 22 players, one referee, and the sound of a ball being kicked in a cathedral with nobody in it. Football had accidentally built the control group, and you remember what those games felt like. You could hear the defenders calling the line. You could hear the manager's individual words from 100 meters away. You could hear a goalkeeper's studs. It felt wrong, and everyone said the same thing at the time, that it wasn't really football, that something essential was missing. Something essential was missing. We just assumed it was missing from the stands. It was also missing from the officiating. Across matches played behind closed doors, the home team won 36% of them. With fans in the building, that figure is around 46%. 10 percentage points. Gone. Not to a tactic, not to a signing, not to a manager. To silence. And when researchers looked at why, they found the fingerprint. Away teams received around 20% fewer cards when there was nobody in the stands. Cards for both sides dropped, but the drop was far bigger for the visitors. So think about what actually happened there. For decades, we explained home advantage with things that sound sensible. The familiar pitch, the travel, sleeping in your own bed, the energy of the fans lifting the players. And then the fans left, and it turned out a serious chunk of home advantage wasn't in the players' legs at all. It was in the referee's head. Quick question for the comments before we go on, because I want to know. When your stadium was empty, did your team actually get worse? Because the numbers say a lot of you were watching your side lose an advantage they never earned in the first place. Now here's how you know this is real, and not just a story that fits. If the crowd is genuinely the cause, then physically moving the crowd further away should weaken the effect. Not metaphorically, literally, meters. And that's exactly what the research found. In stadiums built with a running track between the stands and the pitch, the home bias is smaller. Same league, same referees, same rules, different architecture, which means the advantage your club has isn't only about your fans, or your history, or your famous atmosphere. Part of it was poured in concrete decades before you were born, by an architect who was thinking about the Olympics. There are clubs in Europe right now paying enormous money to move out of athletic stadiums and build tight, steep, English-style grounds where the front row is almost on the touchline. They'll tell you it's about atmosphere, it's about revenue, it's about the fan experience, it's also about pressure. Measurable, documented, decision-changing pressure. They are buying proximity to the referee's ear, and they are not required to say so out loud. Everything so far, someone could still argue with. Studies can be challenged, samples can be questioned. That's how science is supposed to work. So let's finish with something nobody can argue with. Because football did it to itself, on purpose, in public. In 2023, English football changed how stoppage time gets counted. Not the law didn't change at all. The categories in the rulebook stayed exactly the same. What changed was the habit. Instead of tossing in a rough 30 seconds per incident, officials started actually timing what was lost. Celebrations, substitutions, cards. Every second clocked. The effect was immediate and enormous. Average added time in the Premier League went from around 8.5 minutes to over 11.5. Matches started routinely running past 100 minutes, and the ball was genuinely in play almost 4 minutes longer per game than the season before. Now follow that logic all the way to the end, because this is the whole point of the video. If tightening the method of counting changes a match by 3 minutes, then the old number was never a measurement. It was an opinion. For decades, every fan who ever screamed that the referee was killing the clock and every fan who screamed that the referee was giving them forever were both arguing about a figure that had never been objectively calculated in the first place. The football authorities didn't just admit the number was soft, they proved it by hardening it and watching the sport change shape overnight. And here's the part that flips the whole thing around. This entire video, you've been thinking about how to read the referee. Which one gives cards? Which one lets things go? Which one you can push? But it runs the other way too. He has a file on you, not a literal file. Something worse, a reputation. Every player who has ever gone down too easily has spent that reputation without knowing it. Because the moment officials decide a player embellishes, that player stops getting the calls, including the real ones. It's the boy who cried wolf, except the wolf is a defender's studs, and the punishment lands on the day you're actually telling the truth. And there's a feedback loop underneath it that's genuinely unsettling. Research comparing leagues found that players dive more often in the leagues where referees are more likely to reward a dive. Diving isn't a national character trait. It's a response to incentives. Show me how an official judges contact, and I'll show you how the players in front of him will behave within a season. So it's not a one-way relationship. The crowd shapes the referee. The referee shapes the players. The players shape the crowd. Round and round every weekend in every stadium on Earth. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is the part where a video like this usually goes stupid. Nobody in this story cheated. There's no bribe, no conspiracy, no secret phone call. The economists who found that 35% were not looking for corruption, they were looking for what happens to an honest professional standing inside a wall of human sound. Not everyone agrees on the size of the effect, and it isn't identical in every league. That argument is still live, but that's exactly what makes it frightening rather than scandalous. Because a corrupt referee is a solvable problem. You catch him, you ban him, you move on. An honest referee whose judgment bends 15% because 70,000 people gasped at the same moment that isn't a scandal. That's a design feature. It's been in the sport since the first person paid to stand next to a pitch and shout. And it means something else too. Something almost tender, which is that every fan who ever gave up a Saturday, whoever sang until their voice broke for a team that was losing anyway, whoever felt slightly ridiculous shouting at a man who couldn't possibly hear them. Individually, they were right. It was never pointless. It was never just atmosphere. It was doing something, and now there are numbers on it. We call them the 12th man. We've always said it like a compliment, like a nice bit of poetry for the matchday program. It was never poetry. The 12th man is real. He plays every home game. He never gets booked, and he doesn't touch the ball. He works on one man's hesitation, and he gets paid in seconds. And now you know his number, 35%. Next time you're standing in your own ground, in the 90th minute, 1 goal down, and the whole place is screaming at a man who's looking at his watch, you'll know exactly what you're doing. You're not supporting, you're negotiating. Next week, I want to show you the rule change that quietly made it almost impossible for a small club to win a game late. Follow along and I will see you there.